Okay, so excuse me. This is 111, of course, and we are now heading well into week 8. And so we have finished papers 1 and 2. We are heading now into the second half of the semester with papers 3 and 4. And probably the most important thing for you to keep in mind is now that you've gotten MLA style ready and burned into your memory, I guess. Now you get to switch that up and go to APA style. And so as you think about that, there is a presentation on APA style that's available for you. It kind of walks you through some of the ways to set up your paper. We're kind of using somewhat APA style light in this class. There's a whole bunch of ins and outs, and APA style is a little more complex, I think, in some ways than MLA style. But one of the keys to APA style, as you're learning the presentation, is that it doesn't emphasize the author per se. If you remember in MLA style, a lot of times it was the author who got a lot of the credit. In APA style, the emphasis is now on the year or the date of the research that's been done. And that's pretty important. And so if you're thinking about, for instance, let's say you want to write a paper about diabetes, just to make one up, we won't be doing that. But just to say that you want to write a paper about diabetes, obviously APA style will want you to go within the last 3 to 5 years of research, and that's kind of the rule of thumb, 3 or 5. Once you start hitting 5, you're getting out there, because things change rapidly in the sciences, and sciences include education, biology, chemistry, et cetera, even computer sciences. And so odds are, if you're writing about diabetes, you don't want to be finding sources from 1972, 1887, 1925, because that knowledge is no longer useful or beneficial to the current discussion. So that's one caveat as you think about APA style, is you certainly don't want to be citing things that are older, and you certainly don't want to be citing what they call lay sources. In other words, just blogs or whatever, which we shouldn't have been doing to begin with. But with APA style in particular, it's very important that you find things that are scientifically viable, that have been peer reviewed, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure you watch the APA style presentation. This unit that we're embarking on now is going to be for medicine, okay? And I guess with journalism, one of the issues is maybe not having enough topics to really write about. On the opposite side with medicine, I think students have the opposite problem, that there's just so much that sort of snowballs on you. And so I encourage you, when you think about writing about medicine, that you narrow it down to a topic that's pretty easily achievable. And so you might want to write about, let's say, and we'll read about, let's say you wanted to write about cloning, okay? That's a pretty big topic, but you might want to narrow that down to something such as cloning food or food sources, right? GMO crops and so on. So you want to make sure that you narrow down your research as much as possible, because you don't want to write about something that's just a big topic. And so I had a student, for instance, want to write about cancer. And that was their thing. I want to write a research paper on cancer, okay? And that's just huge. And there is a book that came out recently. It's called The Emperor of All Maladies. That's a history of cancer. And it's several hundred pages long, and it's still an introductory text. And so as you think about writing about certain things having to do with medicine, you want to make sure that you're bringing it down to a very finite thing. And for instance, gene therapy in treating cancer would be something that would be doable. There's still a lot of stuff out there, but just typing cancer into your database will get you several 100,000 hits, and that's definitely a sign that you're starting too big. You want to definitely narrow down your research to where you're getting 1,000, couple hundred hits, and then you're in a good place. Along those lines, as we're talking about medicine and APA style, we're now shifting to our third rhetorical mode, which is research. And there's a presentation on that, but just if you're watching this announcement, which you should, remember we haven't gotten to argumentation yet, so you shouldn't be arguing for a change or a particular program or policy. With research, it's just the facts, okay? Here's my topic, here's all of the stuff about that particular topic, okay? So in a research paper, probably one of the worst things that you can do is say, the U.S. government should devote more funding to cancer research. That's an argument. That's our last paper, okay, paper number 4. But a more appropriate thesis would be something like spending levels in the United States have consistently increased in the last 2 decades regarding cancer research, or something like that. That's just off the top of my head. Whereas a statement of fact, okay, and then you're going to say, okay, well, we're going to talk about increasing levels, so let's start at 1980, okay, and see what's going on there, and then sort of work your way through. And so as we think about sources and how recent they are, one of the few caveats with APA style is if you're writing a historically based paper, then you can certainly bend a lot of your research to that particular year or that particular time frame. But if you're writing about something that's relatively new or recent, so let's just say you want to talk about genetically modified crops, okay, then you're stuck within that 3 to 5 year range. So just a brief introduction for what we're going to be doing for the next couple of weeks. It seems like everyone is pretty much on task. There are some issues in which it's clear that somebody hasn't read the material or watched the presentation, and then they turn in a paper not having read any of the material or watched the presentation. One of the things, is that in order to succeed in college/work/life, is that you have to be able to follow instructions and make sure that you're keeping up with the material. And I know my presentations aren't necessarily as exciting as Breaking Bad, okay, or Transformers or whatever, but they're there to be useful and they're there to help you out, and it's also material that you're responsible for, and so make sure that you're pushing your way through all of that, especially APA style, because once we make that switch for paper 3 and 4, you're going to be held responsible for that. So if you turn in paper MLA style, you won't get any points for formatting, which will absolutely destroy your overall grade. And so kind of keep that in mind as we progress through. So as always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask.